Yeah, we just started.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, so hey everyone, we thank you so much for joining this webinar. Today's session, we from PERMIAS are collaborating with Akademi Karir from Indonesia, and specifically to introduce you all to strategy consulting. And we'll have Pranav, our speaker, later to uh, give you or to tell you all about it. But just wanted to let you know that this is an event from Permias Professional Development. So just a little bit of introduction about us is we are uh, our department focuses on professional development for students. So if you want to know more about careers in the United States or just career talks in general, this is sort of the kind of things that we think through and create events about. And this particular event is one of them. And we every month we try to have one event like this. So follow our Instagram at permias.nasional to follow what are all the different events that we are gonna be doing. So with that, just ground rules for today. If we can go to the next slide. So please keep your camera on whenever possible, and we have a virtual background that uh maybe Jonathan you can share in the chat. So if you all can just if possible turn on your camera and use the provided virtual background that we have, that will be helpful. And please be present throughout the session and stay respectful. And for any questions that you have, you can submit it anonymously, or you can also put your name there in slido.com, and you have this code to join today's Slido session. And at the end, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session for all the questions that you have put into the Slido. And if we go to the next slide, and we also have an Instagram story challenge today. So if you win, you get a 1 hour free coaching session from Academic Career Coaches. So to win this challenge, so just summarize your key takeaways from today's webinar, and then you can post it in Instagram and tag academiccareer.id. Um, the deadline is 24 hours after today's session, so be sure to do that right after this webinar ends, and we'll have a reminder about this again at the end of the session here. And to introduce you all for our speaker today, we have Pranav Daryanani. He is one of the coach in academic career. He just to give a brief overview of his profile, he graduated from the Business Administration and Management from Base Business School in London in 2017. And then he works for 3 years in Deutsche Bank as credit analyst and portfolio manager. He graduated with an MBA from the prestigious Yale School of Management. And right after that, he joined Bain and Company in Jakarta. And in 3 years, he got two promotions and hold the position of senior manager. So he has a wealth of experiences and knowledge on this particular topic. So very excited to hear more about him and his experience. And so without further ado, Pranav, I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks so much. And good morning or good evening to everybody here. I'm super excited to get through the topics we discussed today and also hopefully hear some of your questions and we can keep this as interactive as possible. All right, let's jump straight into it. So today we'll talk about three things, right? One, what is strategy consulting? Two, how do you break into strategy consulting firms if this is a career that interests you? And three is what makes consulting's problem solving different? Now, even if you are not super focused on getting into strategy consulting, I think the toolkit that we'll touch upon very briefly today has a lot of value in any career that you get into. And one of the reasons why consultants are typically poached up or searched for a lot of different companies in a lot of different industries. So with that, we'll just start off with what is strategy consulting, right? Now, the slide says it's like consulting is like a doctor in the business world. But one of the analogies I like to use is like a therapist, if any of you have had the opportunity to use one. And we do three things that I think helps out companies, businesses, and also business leaders. One, it's when your expertise is limited. You kind of bring in a consultant. So take, for example, a scenario in which a company is expanding into a foreign market. So I worked with a startup in San Francisco that was looking to expand into Southeast Asia, but they didn't really understand the market and they didn't really understand who they could partner with and what their pathways to growth were. But they understood their product and their product market fit really well. So that's when we came in to kind of give a market landscape. So it's helping build out expertise where required. Two, it's when the project is urgent or time sensitive. You can see a consultant as a catalyst at times to help kind of raise the alarm or identify what they like to use in jargon is burning platform for when change is required. And so you bring in a consultant from the outside to help shake things up, but or also help you execute when you're busy with day-to-day operations. And lastly, it's when you need an objective external perspective. So I call back to the idea of either seeing consulting as a doctor or like a therapist. It's having somebody as an external partner and advisor kind of give you this view as to what you might be missing or where different perspectives are required, right? I think one of the most value add elements of having a consultant or an advisor on board is sometimes also to align different stakeholders in a business. So you may have a CFO, a CEO, a COO looking at things in different ways or wanting to pull the business in different directions. Sometimes having a third party come in to help mediate that and negotiate that is also useful. So that's kind of the overview of why consultants add value. Next slide. So there are different types of consulting firms in the market with different specialities. Now, this slide really lays them out in different pillars, right? You got strategy consulting all the way to IT and tech consulting. But frankly, more and more, it's coming together. The reason why is with AI coming into the market, with companies being more discerning in terms of how they allocate their capital and cash, they're not just looking for, let's say, one person to do their strategy like a Bain or McKinsey, and then another one to do their financial budgeting, and then another one to execute like an Accenture, right? They're pushing consultants more and more to help implement, to help be part of the execution. And so at my time at Bain, not only were we at times doing the strategy side, which is things like where to play and how to win, but also doing things like due diligences for mergers and acquisitions, or doing process improvements for operations, or at times, doing digital transformations. So more and more, this is actually coming together. Next slide, please. So touching upon that is what type of cases do we do and what type of projects do strategy consultants do? And here you see a whole bunch, but let me just touch upon a few, right? One of the classic ones is market entry, which I touched upon before, is which market or where to play. So which market should you tap into and how to win? What should be your strategy to enter that market and eventually gain substantial share? It can also be things like cost optimization. So for example, one of the projects that I worked on was looking at your spend with third-party vendors and where you can kind of optimize or standardize the contract terms with some of these vendors in order to save you some cash. It can also be mergers and acquisitions. So when company A is looking to acquire company B, you help advise and assess whether or not that company is in a good position within the market, whether there's a good value creation plan to help it grow going down the line. What are some of the risks or strengths of that company? This helps things to where the investment bank will help kind of give you a valuation on what they think the fair value of that company is, but a consultant can come in to tell you whether or not this would be a good acquisition based on where your company is today and where you can take it forward. You can also include things like operations improvement. So streamlining your processes, improving productivity of your operations. And so it really spans the different types of elements. And also what you see below is the different types of industries. So everywhere from consumer and retail to manufacturing and healthcare to telecommunications, media and entertainment and public sector. For those of you looking at Indonesia, it's very dominant into energy, natural resources, given where our country is, consumer products, because we've got a very large population, and then also financial services, given a lot of our banks are very large. But over time, that's starting to grow as well. All right. Public sector more and more engages consultants. Manufacturing and healthcare is also growing, and then also M&A and due diligences. All right. So what does a day look like as a consultant? And yes, there is no standard projects or typical days, but if most consultants you meet are very diligent about how they allocate their time. Now, it's a team project and it's a team effort. So you normally start the day working with your team and aligning and ensuring everybody's on the same page as to what needs to be done, but also touching up on what has been done and where things can be improved, right? Now, you're reviewing progress across your different streams, and you're also preparing for any upcoming meetings. But maybe perhaps before I get into the details of a day, it's just understanding a little bit of how a team is structured, right? In every team, you would likely to have a partner or two who is responsible for the client delivery, and we'll touch upon this later. You have the manager who helps execute the day-to-day and also monitors and ensures that everything of the project is running. And then you have consultants and analysts that run different work streams, right? Below that. Think of it as like a very professional university class project, but you meet every day to kind of get into the same page so that you're delivering the right outcome and a high standard. So the start of the day is aligning that team together. During the day, it might be checking in with your client or your team because typically more and more now, consulting is less about creating a deck and just sending it out to a client and it landing, and then they have to read 300 pages of a slide. But it's becoming more of sitting side by side with the client. So maybe the CEO hired you, maybe the CFO hired you, but you spend a lot of time with their -1, -2, -3 to understand what are the problems and what are the hurdles to execution and how you can help them. And so typically we pair up with the client as much as possible. And so during the day, it's a lot of it is connecting with the client, understanding how they're progressing on certain things, driving some of the analyses that are required, and also translating some of the client feedback into actions for the team. It's not exactly like 3 p.m., 6 p.m., but towards the end of the day, you're touching upon in terms of what are the progresses and where you need to move forward next. And you're typically thinking about not only the next day, but the next week on what's going to come up next. Um, it's managing some of the follow-up, speaking to your partner, giving them updates on where you are during the day. I once worked with a partner who was very diligent about having an end of day note, and he wanted bullet points in terms of where we were progressing, what input was required from him, and what were the next steps. And that was required at every day, right? And so that keeps you very sharp in terms of where are you really progressing in a project and what needs to be done next. Move on to the next slide. So a typical consulting project will start off with a proposal and client development. So what this means is just understanding what does your client really need, right? It's meeting people, having coffees, having dinners, and just trying to see what keeps them up at night as a business owner, or what keeps them up at night as a business operator. And from there, you start to build a proposal in terms of where you can help. That is frankly one of the most toughest parts of the job, which is the sales part, right? And understanding where you can bring value. because you don't want to sell a project where you don't have the team or capabilities. But once you're in, then it's about staffing the team. It's about building the right team and capabilities to be able to deliver the project, right? So if you're selling something on market entry in Southeast Asia, but your team's all US based or Europe based, it's not a great team because they don't have that local nuance and local knowledge. So it's about building the right team from there. And then it comes to project delivery. Now, that comes through the lifespan of the project. And I would actually say that this is a continuous project and a continuous process, which is why you see this loop. Because while you're doing the project, you're also trying to think about, hey, there are different elements of the business that we're seeing that could be improved. And you're having those continuous conversations with the client. And at times they'll say, okay, I know we hired you for X, but we're actually seeing we need you, like you've got really good capabilities in doing X plus Y. So maybe we'll bring in some of that. And so you bring in expertise and teams to come and help you. But typically it goes from client development to staffing to delivery of a project. Move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is about how the role advances as you go up. I'll speak less about compensation, but I'll speak more about kind of what the role looks like and how your client views you and what the client kind of sees you as a thought leader as you shape on. So early on in your career, you start off as a business analyst or an associate, right? And what this means is you're probably within a work stream. So if I take a project where one of them that I did, harking back to the market entry for this San Francisco-based startup looking for Asia, was two parts. One was what are the type of partnerships that we could build, and so help assessing who are the right partners they could partner with on distribution and building and entering the market. And the second element was how do we financially model what the right projections are, right? So if you take the work stream, there's two. And so on one of the work streams, you would have a business analyst or an associate paired up with a senior associate or a consultant to drive that answer forward, right? So the consultant a lot of times thinking about how do I take this, how do I drive this ahead? What type of analysis do I need to do? And the associate is kind of helping to execute that analysis. That may require surveys, that might require data scraping, might require building that financial model from the start. But those two are paired up pretty closely together, and they're also dealing with the junior level of the clients and building that trust with them, right? So if you're a local fresh graduate, you're normally starting at the business analyst associate level. And if you're an MBA graduate, I started at the consultant level. But it's not really a hierarchy. I think it's having a good team pairing between these two is really critical for the case. And there's been a lot of times, even as a consultant, I've gotten a lot of great ideas from the associate who I was working with as they got really close with the data and some of the insights. Then you head up to being a project leader. So this is where you are responsible across the entire project delivery and all the work streams. And here you're talking about really shaping the answer. And you're seen as when the client is worried about the project delivery, they call you because they know you're the closest to the project. You're the one a lot of times also presenting the answers and driving in terms of what are the main roadblocks and what are the issues the client is facing, right? The last one is then the partner, the managing director of the product. And this one is, I would say, like generally the one who's really trying to bring the client perspective. They've worked with clients and they've worked on projects over 10 to 15 years at this point in time. And they've got the experience to kind of shape you in the right direction or point you to start to think what would be some of the questions that are top of mind for the client, especially as they were the ones who probably sold the case and they know the client really well, right? So they understand what are the priorities there. So as a manager, where you're worried about the day-to-day execution, worried about where the direction of the project is, the partner and the managing director at that point is trying to shape, are you focusing on the most important things? And are you focused on what the client really cares about, right? And sometimes during a project, you started to realize that the project you're working on might not be top of mind. And so it starts to shape into the right directions as to what are the key topics and key aims of this. All right, I'll move on to the next slide. So beyond monetary benefits, you did see that the pay is substantial, especially for a market like Indonesia. Um, but what else do you benefit from here? And now I'm going to be straight up with you. I left Bain about a year ago, and now I run a business of my own. But I felt a lot of these different elements that I've learned from consulting has really helped me. One being the cross-industry exposure, so understanding how it is to work in different industries and the different elements of it, right? From all the way from sales and marketing to logistics to M&A. It's working with some really interesting clients. These are people who are top of their game, frankly. I've learned so much from some of the clients that I've worked with, and frankly, it was clients that inspired me to take a leap to do something entrepreneurial. And now, lastly, the strong exit opportunities. So I went into entrepreneurship, but I've seen a lot of friends move into other great corporate roles, working for the, leading tech companies here or AI companies as well. Some even heading to government, just on the back of the skill set, the diligence, and the mindset that you build in consulting, right? I think doing 2 to 3 years in consulting also gives you a chance to really reflect upon where you may want to shape your career, especially for those of you that early on are a bit unsure. Do you want to work in marketing? Do you want to work in fashion? Do you want to work in tech, and you're not really sure where to take your career? Consulting offers you that kind of broad-based and the foundational skill set to take that forward down the line. All right. So section number 2 is how do you break into strategy consulting firms? And I hope section number 1 gave you a little bit of a view in terms of what you might find interesting. So typically you have 3 segments, which is the online submission, the online test, and a case interview. Now case interviews, I think this is the main part where you've got to hone down, and as much as practice or joining a consulting club of your university would be super helpful. And going to the next slide. So a case interview, and we'll do a very brief example, has a number of steps. One, it's understanding what the problem is, right? And asking the right questions first. Number 2 is once you understand the prompt and the question, is developing the framework. And there's a whole bunch of different examples and frameworks that you can do here. But like, let's say, for example, it's the problem is, how do I need to increase profitability? A very basic framework can be, how do we drive revenue and lower costs, right? And then going deeper within that. Then you've got exhibits and math. So a lot of times they'll prompt you with, hey, these are some of the numbers that are facing the client, or these are some of the data that we've got. What do you think about it? And so looking through those exhibits and building out kind of the structure there. At times also your interviewer will drop some ideas on you. And so helping you to brainstorm in that discussion is also another key element. And lastly, then the conclusion and the recommendation. So when you're doing this within 25 minutes and you're going all the way from the framework to the math to brainstorming some ideas, the key part at the end is, what's your recommendation? Should I do this or should I not? Right. And so this is that key finishing point is also an important element of a case interview. So Akademi Career does have some resources that you can use. They've got an AI-powered CV reviewer for the first step, a case interview preparation package, which would show you in terms of what the case interviews look like, the frameworks, the case types. And I think the key part here is having that case buddy group and someone to work with. And then lastly, one-on-one coaching. So a number of my friends do coaching for Akademi Career, but having somebody on your side just to guide you through in terms of what makes a strong applicant. Even once you get in, it's how can we help shape your career and get you into the right projects and cases as well, and kind of accelerate your career. The CV checker kind of gives different things like a score-based CV assessment. feedback report and some key takeaways and recommendations in terms of how to improve your resume. Don't forget, this is the first kind of impression that you give to any company. The second one is kind of a bullet points improver. It's how do you improve the bullet points that are inside your CV. The key weaknesses, ensuring you don't have too much fluff, but also at the same time the right amount of detail and keeping it concise so that someone can pick it up. So using some of these tools that Akademi Career provides is also helpful. And then the consulting case interview preparation package. I would say that this is probably the most important element. It's understanding on how a case interview works. What are the samples of it? How do interviews score you and think about it? And also, what are the different types of consulting cases? I would say this is purely about reps. Doing more and more of these gets you more prepared. And I would dedicate, if consulting is something you're thinking about, spending at least a month to two doing case interviews and prepping for this, right? Yeah, so it also includes things like the mock case interviews, having a case buddy peer group. Doing this with friends can actually be some fun, and takes the pressure off as well, because you learn a lot from how other people think about the exact same problem. So I would definitely recommend, if you're looking at consulting, is build a peer group around you, that can help you practice and prep for these. And then there's some expert coaches. A lot of these are from Bain, BCG, McKinsey, and I think having a call with them or two just to shape, one, is this the right career for you? But also, if it is, how should you kind of think about entering this world of consulting and shaping your decisions based on that. All right. So we touched upon a little bit in terms of case prep and consulting prep, right? But what makes a consulting's problem solving different? So I would always tell my team that to me, consulting was a business of selling ideas. And first part of that is understanding what is the problem or what is the issue that is facing your client or facing the market, right? From there on, you can be able to get the right idea and the right solution. So the first start is defining it, understanding what is the core problem that you're going to solve, right? SCQ is situation, complication, and question or resolution that I like to use. But the second part is, once you understand what the right problem is, how do you structure and break it into the core parts? What are the root factors or the main hypotheses that are driving that? And then from there, it's about analyzing it, finding the right facts and data to test these hypotheses or these issues to know whether or not they really are relevant, or maybe you need to rethink about it and redefine what you're looking at. And then once you're able to analyze and break it out, you have the right solutions that come into play. It's about synthesizing those findings. One of the key things about that we would always get pushed in consulting is to think about, so what? So if you say, oh, the market is growing, well, so what? Like, isn't that evident, right? What is the implication for this client? And then lastly, it's delivery. And this I would say is very understated, but it's about just beyond just saying, oh, this is a problem you're having, this is what I think the solution is. It's actually thinking about, how are you going to go execute that? What are the right deliverables? What are the right checkpoints to getting it across the line and ensuring that this comes home, right? So today we'll focus on define and structure, which I think are one of the key important points of a process like this. You want to jump on to the next slide? Okay, so situation, complication, question, or sometimes what I like to think is resolution, right? So one, defining first, what is the situation in front of you? Understanding the context in that bigger picture. What is the main area or focus of this? Two, what's the complication? What really is the problem within the situation, right? And lastly is then, what are the questions in the case interview that really clarifies this and hones this down for everybody involved, right? And we'll take an example of this, but I like to use this framework not only just for businesses, but also even for personal situations, right? So understanding what it is that you're facing, what is the problem that you're having, and then what are the right things to give you clarity as well. We go on to the next slide. So in a good structure is this element called MISI, right? So, and we'll touch upon that briefly as well. But the idea here is once you have your key question, it's what are the hypotheses or issues that break apart from that, right? And having that on top then allows you to structure the thinking process. Now, typically, once we're able to break this out into issue 1, 2, and 3, I'm trying to think of a good example here, but let's take, for example, one of the issues facing a client that I had where they were saying, look, I think we're spending way too much on vendors, on third parties, right? And then it's actually coming to a question of, okay, do you need to buy better or do you need to spend better? And buy better means, do you need to go to the better vendors? Do you need to go to the right providers for what you're buying from outside? Or are you going to the right people, but you're not buying the right products or you're not incentivizing them in the right way, right? And so you're not getting the right outcomes that you want. So that would be your key questions. Then you're splitting that up into one. Issue one, it's how do we source the right vendors? Or maybe issue two is then how do we ensure that we're buying the right things and we are getting the right outcomes from there? And so those are two very separate things, and having those structured separately then allows you to break down deeper into what are the sub issues and the potential root causes of that, right? If we move on to the next slide, you'll understand a little bit more about what MISI means. Now, MISI ME is mutually exclusive, so ensuring they're broken apart separately, and CE is collectively exhaustive, ensuring that all the major elements are covered that needs to be considered. This is a kind of a problem-solving technique to ensure that you're thinking about the right things and not getting jumbled up, but also that you have a core view of everything that you need to think about. And this can be very iterative. And with consulting, not just about you doing it on your own, but also about bringing the right team members and experience to ensure that you have the right framework. So, good example, day to day, it's the difference of about you're going out with a group of friends and you ask where to eat, right? How do you solve this problem? And where to eat is mutually exclusive, right? Do you go for fine dining, casual, or fast food? Now, if you notice, there's no overlap there. Like if you go to a Hakkasan versus if you go to, your basic casual restaurant or you go to McDonald's, they're all three very different categories. But once you answer that, it's and a good example is about what's not mutually exclusive. So you've got fast food, Japanese, Italian, fine dining. Those things can be jumbled up together, right? So you can get a very fast food Japanese restaurant. You can get Italian fine dining, but you can also do Italian casual. So if you notice, that's an example of not mutually exclusive. So whenever you're trying to think of a problem, it's trying to break it down into mutually exclusive parts, right? And that allows you then to think about the problem in clarity. Now, collectively exhaustive, right? It's about thinking about ensuring that you have all the different elements of the issue put together. And so while it's potentially impossible to have every single, I's dotted and T's crossed, it's about trying to ensure you've got as much perspective as possible. So for example, in a question of whether or not to invest in a restaurant, you can think of this basically as an income statement. It's how do I drive my revenues? How do I improve my costs? And then are there any other factors that I need to think about? But if you go into the detail instantly, you can get lost in it, right? So you can start thinking about, okay, revenue, but then what about inventory costs? What about franchise? What about people and headcount and all these other elements? You end up missing it out. But once you've got the right buckets in place, you can then break them out into more and more detail. And so ensure you're not missing out of anything. So that's what collectively exhaustive means. So we'll do a very basic case study example. Now, Bistro Coffee, it's a leading coffee chain in Jakarta and has traditionally relied on third-party delivery platforms like GrabFood and GoFood. Now, demand is growing, but management is getting increasingly concerned about commission fees, direct customer ownership, lack of access to consumer data, and also weakening brand loyalty once you're on these platforms. Now, a lot of digital native coffee players are building their own based apps to order and also having direct delivery. So, a question for you is, should Bistro Coffee do its own delivery service? And this is a very classic consulting case type interview question, right? So, how do you structure this? So, the first issue, understanding what is the key question that this company is trying to solve. The question is, should they do their own direct delivery, right? Once you understand the key question, then we start thinking about what are the sub questions below that, or some of the key issues. All right. Things like, how attractive is the market? How big is the market? Right. So we think about one, market. The second is then thinking about the financial elements of that. And then the third is potentially the competition or players there. So one is, how attractive is the market? Is that key issue number one? Number two is, do you have the capabilities to enter that market? And three, sorry, is entering the market feasible? And then three, do you have the required resources and capabilities? The one thing that I would add here is, what are your competitors doing? And embedding that into some of the decisions that you have as well. And then from there, it's entering what are the sub issues, right? So when you're looking at the market, it's breaking it into things like how fast the market is growing, how big is the market, what's the profit margin, and what's our share. The second element of, is the market feasible? It's thinking about how much marketing would we need to implement into it? What's our current distribution channels if we were to launch our own delivery service? And then the last part is building the required resource and capabilities. Do I have the right capabilities to do this? Do I have the right brand awareness or the customer base to do it? So I think just in a high level, it's understanding the framework that we discussed before. It's what is the key question? How do you split that into the MECE issues? And then going into detail of building out the sub issues here. All right. So I think we covered all three today. What is strategy consulting? How do you break into these consulting firms and where Akademi Career can help you? And then what makes a consultant's problem solving different? We do have a bit of time left. So also happy to open it up to questions and get your views there.
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions people put in Slido. There are 12 questions so far. So we probably can just go through from top to bottom.
Yeah,
Oh, I have it over here. Nice.
cool. Do you want to tell me where you want me to start, or do I just pick it out?
You can just pick it out, I think. Maybe start
Okay,
from the top one because that has 2 votes.
sure. Let's go with AI, which I think is the one that a lot of people are thinking about. So I think this is quite interesting, the analytical and research heavy tasks and how AI is changing that, right? Uh, this is a question that the consulting industry is really grappling with right now and thinking about it. But I would say that it shouldn't, in my view, it shouldn't replace consultants, but it should empower them a little bit more. It's the analogy or the thinking process is like when Excel or a calculator came into the market, it's not like consultants became um, useless, for lack of a better word. But it's actually a tool for them to be able to execute and think about this in the right manner, right? So, for example, one of the things that I was doing when I was working in mining consulting, we were manually tagging each of the spare parts and what their use cases were. Now AI would help doing that, right? And so that frees up my time to start thinking about, okay, now we've got the right data set. How do I implement that, right? It allows you to take a lot of the large databases that are coming in and piece together the right patterns and insights that are coming from there. And then thinking about what is the right, so what? What's the right next step? What's the implication for the client? So there will be a whole segment of people and consultants that are very technical based. that will be able to do data crunching, analysis, build the right AI agents to do the right skill sets and piece out the right data. But there also be a second type of consultant, in my view. And that's the one that really understands sales and the client and how to present the right ideas and topics, right? And I think when you're thinking about what skills you should focus on to stay relevant, it's actually asking yourself is what type of professional do you see yourself being and what type of skill sets do you have, right? And honing down there. Are you the type of person that really enjoys data analysis and building tools and codes and agents? Or are you the type of person that sees yourself as a consultant who's an advisor to clients, to understanding what their issues are, being on the ground, going to the mine sites, working with the technicians and understanding what their core problems are. But you kind of also have to understand the two together, right? So if you're building all these analytical tools, it has to be rooted in a clear client problem. And if you're just asking what the client needs, but not delivering or not knowing how to deliver, then you're not very useful either. So one, it's understanding, do you see yourself on a spectrum of very technical to very client based, but then understanding, do you at least have the basic understanding? If you're going more on the client side, do you have at least a basic understanding on what AI can produce and do so that you can shape your team to delivering that? And if you're on the very technical side, it's how do you have the right communication with the team rapport to be able to understand what the client's requiring as well. All right. I hope that helps, but feel free to drop any further questions as well. Um, Consulting recruitment landscape in Indonesia, I believe it's two cycles. There's a Jan cycle and there's a summer cycle. But if you're coming in from industry, I think they're always open to recruiting. I believe each firm is slightly different, so it's worth checking with the HR of those firms. But generally, it's 2 cycles a year, and it follows the graduation cycles of schools, right? If you have no internship experience in consulting, even in Big Four, can you enter MBB as a fresh graduate? Totally can. And in fact, I think having internship experience or having experience generally outside of consulting is actually a plus, in my view, because it shows you've got some experience in a particular industry or in a field that you can bring in that perspective when you're doing consulting, right? I wouldn't be too focused in terms of having the right internship experience in consulting, but I would be more focused about ensuring you do have some internship experience, whether that's working with a startup, whether that's working with an established company, or even launching your own business, right? And if you see that as a summer project, it'll give you the insights in terms of or experience that you can sell when you're doing a case interview or entering MBB. So, for example, one of the things that I did when I was recruiting for Bain in my MBA, I actually launched a startup and it was focused on creative writing, something completely different to consulting. But the experience of building that business up, building the website, building the community-based platform that was there really helped to present and was an interesting hook that I could speak about when I was doing interviews for MBB. Okay, before I jump into networking, I actually like the last question. So if I graduate from a liberal arts college with a broad understanding of things, but lack of a specific skill, how do I make up for this? Right. So when I did my MBA, I met a lot of people from varied backgrounds. It was people from the military. There were people who were former actors on Broadway, right? Or theater nerds. And they wanted to break into consulting. And they were worried about this very specific question, right? But I think it's not underselling yourself. It's trying to understand what skills or what things did you hone in your current background that you think would be relevant to a business degree or a business or any company, right? So let's say, for example, I don't know too much about a liberal arts degree, right? But I'm taking an example of someone I met in the military. And he was a soldier, got deployed into different parts of the world. And one of the things he knew really well was how do I get the right processes in place to ensure that everything lands at the right time, that we're well organized. Now, he doesn't know how to do financial modeling, and he doesn't know, the difference between formulas in Excel, but he knows how to get a project done. And so that was a skill set that he knew he had that he could bring into consulting. And then it was about honing some of these other basic foundational elements. And so if you're still an undergrad, bringing that different perspective, understanding how you can sell that perspective to any potential employer is helpful. But then also building some of the foundational skills. So you can just do things like an Excel course on financial modeling, which you can pick up online easily. It's doing maybe a course on how to use Claude to build an agent to solve some basic elements, or doing SQL to get data analysis together. Those are the basic specific skills that you can hone on to the broader range of understanding that you have. And then when you come to consulting, they'll coach you in how to be a proper consultant. So I wouldn't sell yourself short, and I think there's experiences that you have that you can definitely bring to any interview. Okay, how important is networking? I think networking for any career is important, right? But I wouldn't necessarily think about it as like, oh, this is a criteria that I've just got to do to get the job. I would actually think about it in terms of speaking to as many people as you can to know whether or not this is the right career for you, and have genuine conversations. If you go into it being like, okay, here's a whole Excel list of people that I need to meet, and I need to ensure I will do 30-minute coffees with each of them, it becomes very transactional. But if you come up and say, look, like that question earlier, I'm a liberal arts student. I want to break into consulting, but I don't know if I've got the right skill set. I saw your profile, you had, a degree, or you did creative writing or whatever it is. Would love to have a conversation and just learn more. And then you have that one conversation, and you have another conversation, you have a third, and then you start to realize, hey, actually consulting is not for me, or it is really for me, and these are the skill sets that I've got, right? And so speaking to as many people as you can, building that network early is something that um, helps to understand that this is the right space, helps you to be able to get into these doors, but it doesn't stop once you're in. It was something I continued to do even when I was at Bain and as a consultant, because it was through that I started to learn about what my clients were doing that I thought was really interesting, what my partner was working on the side, and what type of case he was selling. And then I was like, okay, that's the next project that I really want to do, right? And so I think my answer to on how do you approach it is actually do it from a space that is genuine and that you really are interested in, because it shows, and it's quality over quantity, in my view. Now, okay, as a junior and a fresh grad, how did you approach and present yourselves to senior managers and senior level clients? It starts as practice, and it starts actually not going to the senior managers and senior level clients. It starts with working within the team first, right? So if you're a fresh grad, if you're an analyst, practice presenting to the consultant above you. Hone it there, right? Practice presenting to other coworkers that you've got. Also, spend as much time as possible focused in the room. A lot of times you're in a content session or you're in a meeting and you're opening up your laptop and you're trying to work on the Excel model while your manager's speaking to your partner because it's not relevant to you. I would actually put your laptop down and learn and like hear what what is the manager saying? How is he approaching it or she approaching it? Is the partner reacting to that well, right? Um, I've seen at times where I've actually learned more from failing. Like even as a senior manager, at times I would present something and the partner would be like, "No, that doesn't work," right? Or you haven't thought about this in the right way, or you haven't thought about it in the right space. That I learned from. But I also know if my team is concentrating, they're learning from that as well. Because the next time they come and present to me an idea, they're like, "Hey, Pran, last time you really messed up when you presented to the partner. I I thought of this in a different way, and I think this might help you as you present next time, right?" And so I think it's about being in the room, being really present, but it's also about practicing with people around your level and the level just above you. Um, oh, interesting. What market opportunity or industry shift convinced you to leave Bain, given the lucrative nature of staying on the traditional partner track? So I left exactly 1 month after getting promoted. And it was a really difficult decision because I was working hard towards that promotion. and I got promoted and I got the first month paycheck and I was like, oh, like this is a big number to walk away from, and it's also a big pathway to walk away from, right? But um, the way I saw my career, if you saw all the way from the start, is I initially started as an investor, then I became a consultant, and now I'm an operator. And I always saw business as very similar to sports, right? And in sports, you've got, let's just take football because the World Cup's coming up. You've got commentators and people who bet on poly market on the result of the game. That's how I saw investing was, right? I was commentating on what I thought was the right trends, who are going to be the players that are going to move to which club, what teams are going to win. And I was betting on those outcomes. To then becoming a coach, like a consultant, working with these players, ensuring the teams could perform the best they could. And then the lastly is becoming a player itself, which is being an operator. And that's how I saw my career, right? Shaping. Kind of the opposite of how a sports person works. They're normally a sports person, then they become a coach, and then they might become a commentator or so on. But as I worked with a lot of clients in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia, I got really excited about what they were doing. And the people I really respected were the people who were actually fighting this out day to day and trying to make changes to their companies and trying to enter new markets and launch new products and do all these different things. And so I kind of saw this as that's what brought me excitement. It's actually trying to build a business. And that's what I felt made me a good consultant. It's because I actually cared about the businesses that I was consulting and working with. Um, and so I was inching at that point. I was okay. Do I want to continue to be a consultant and be an advisor, or do I want to try be an operator and see if I've got the right knack for it, right? And so I took a leap and launched the business. So right now it's a liquor store business in Bali, and so we sell alcohol, retail, and the weddings and the different events. Vastly different to consulting, but I saw it as a J curve. It's about taking a short-term risk. I may lose money in the next 2 to 3 years, but if I build this right, financially it can be lucrative down the line. But it's less about the financial part. It's more about what actually drives me and what interests me is building a business. Now, if I ever chose to go back to consulting, I think it would make me a better consultant for it because I would understand what are the issues a business face on a day to day. So I hope that answered that question. Um, I've got time for one more. Do you want to pick it for me?
Let's see. So I think we answered that first one. I think the experience and skill we also did. What about maybe that third one?
The C-level people requires a lot of experience.
Right, right.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
actually, never
yeah.
mind. I think there is one. Someone asks, are there moments where you do not even know how to move forward or maybe stuck? Or
Yeah.
and then how did you overcome that?
Yeah, so I think, look, one of the benefits of working in consulting is you're working around some of the most smartest people I've ever met, frankly. Like they went to these top schools, they've got PhDs, they've got all these things, and it can be intimidating from the outside, but once you're in, you realize how important that team is. And like I said earlier, I saw consulting as a business of selling ideas. And so you're being approached by these companies and some of the toughest problems they can't solve, which is why they're coming to you for it, right? You're not meant to have all the answers. You're not meant to know the exact path forward, but you're meant to work with your team to solve that problem. And I think having coming to your team and doing those brainstorming sessions, asking the right questions, identifying the right experts to bring in will help you crack that problem. And so I think realizing that it's not just all on you, and it's not about your intellectual capability and how smart you are, but it's about how do you um, bring in the right people and work with your team to crack that question, right? And I think that applies as well as you're trying to build your career, or as you're trying to navigate problems in your life or day to day. It's not always just your problem. you can actually bring in people to help you, whether that's coworkers, friends, your parents, etc., to navigate these things, right? Someone told me, and again, this applies now as I'm doing entrepreneurship, is I face a lot of problems on a day-to-day basis. I can't solve all of them, right? And so I've built people from Bain, current friends that I sometimes call up and I'm like, hey, I'm really struggling with this one particular client, or I'm really struggling, like for example, this store, I keep losing staff and the staff turnover is so high. What should I do? And then someone's like, oh, dude, I run a business. I go to Job Street and I place these ads and I do these promos and it really helps me, right? And so I'm like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. And coming to build a right board of directors in your personal life or even in your career, is one way that I found really helps crack tough problems. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Look, I hope you enjoyed that. I did. I thought there were some great questions. You guys can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, but you can also go to Akademi Career where there's a whole bunch of coaches and resources for you as well. But no, thanks for joining me this evening or very early in the morning.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pranav. Thank you for all the insights. And Jonathan, I think there's a reminder slide for the Instagram challenge, right? Maybe it's on. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so just a reminder, everyone. So there is this, you can get a chance to win a 1 hour free coaching session if you post your key takeaways and tag academycareer.id and Instagram. It's only, the deadline is 24 hours from when the webinar starts, so make sure to do that. And I think that is all. Oh, I think Jonathan, you want to take a screenshot of the participants, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, so if everyone don't mind to turn on your camera, and then we can just take a screenshot just for documentation purposes. Jonathan, you want to take the screenshot or you want me to do it?
would be good if you can take the screenshot.
Okay,
Will.
sounds good. So taking screenshot now. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you all for joining. Have a good day. Have a good evening. See you all next time. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, Pranav.
No worries. See you.
See ya.